Hi, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours Tuesday Focus, date tagged as 260324. This time, we're looking at managing media production projects. So, all the skills, tools, and techniques that make all your projects, from the simple ones to the massively complex, all run smoother. Project management is, of course, one of the oldest human endeavors. Without question, there was some poor Egyptian during the building of the pyramids that had a bunch of scrolls in a tent and was tracking progress as the stones arrived and probably yelling at the workers because they weren't moving fast enough. Anyway, because face it, every production, no matter how large or small, benefits from planning. And we are very lucky tonight. We have a great panel of experts to lay out the issues and handle your questions, including some faces that'll be familiar to longtime Office Hours viewer. Craig McFarland out of Boston, Massachusetts, the CTO and co-founder of TDS, a software company focused on large-scale IT projects. Ryan Rademan joining us from Chicago, Illinois, who manages large technology projects at Whipfly. In the construction industry, which lives and dies by project tracking and planning. Courtney Gooden, an Office Hours OG, who over the years has had inventions and technical eyes on production processes and is no stranger to strategic planning. And finally, Dave Trautman, again familiar to the Office Hours family, a production and project manager with many years of experience. And of course, with us is our question reader, Cindy Drozda, who will be here taking care of questions. I'm going to toss up the QR code in a little bit. So we'll talk for a little bit and then keep your eyes open for that if you want to get questions into the queue. So I'm going to start with our CTO and ask him to start with some very basic concepts. So, Craig, project management, such a huge topic. Can you start us off with maybe a few very basic things that should always be kept front of mind when you even think about project planning?
Yeah, and I'm CTO. I'm not necessarily project manager. Um, but thinking about this, especially having to do with the creative space, production, and whatnot, it's very different than my background, which is large scale IT projects, where you've got a fixed thing you've got to get done, like releasing software, and you're not sure when it's going to happen, but you have a fixed thing, and so the when you ship it or when you get done, it gets done. With creative, it's you've got a deadline. It's an event or a show, and all the stuff you get done seems to just change day to day as you get closer and closer, that it gets narrow focus. So very
Yeah,
much
the
looking forward to
shrinking
the
window,
discussion
boy,
here.
we've all been there. Ryan, you work in construction. If ever there was an industry that lives and dies by production management, it's got to be construction. It's crazy. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, in construction, my favorite example is when I'm talking to young folks. They're in a college setting, right? And they all have friends that signed a lease for the new apartment building on campus that was going to be done in time for August 15th for everybody to come back to school. That didn't get done. And then those friends all get put up in hotels for the, first 45 days of school or whatever. So I said, do the math, 200 units times 2 bedrooms per units times $175 per night for that developer to put you up in a hotel. Imagine the chain of lawsuits that came downstream. And so I happen to work most often on technology projects, usually implementing the project management systems for construction companies and for real estate developers. And it's just so tangible with regard to the cost and the impact on human life that can really take place if we don't get this stuff right. And so excited to talk today about the different tools that we employ to get the systems rolled out so that they can get the projects rolled out on time and on budget.
Yeah, no matter how big or small the project, we've all been there where you show up, and if the project management is lousy, everything is a mess. And if it's solid and you know where to go next and what your expectations are, it just makes everything easier. Courtney Gooden, you're the only one on the panel with an Emmy for teleprompters, but I know that you've had many business irons in the fire over the years. What's served you best in terms of project management understanding?
Well, I've developed a lot of software on my own over the years. So, I've never had anybody working under me. So project management really isn't my strong point. However, working for over 50 years in the production industry in film and television, I'm on the receipt of a lot and working a lot with project managers. And every television show, every television series, every motion picture film is an incredible project management task because coordinating You're juggling schedules of big name actors, which get a lot of money for every day that they work, and scheduling is crucial to getting all of that stuff done on time and on schedule and dealing with everyone's availability and publishing call sheets and publishing schedules so that the entire crew and the cast knows when to show up and where you're going, because it can be in different locations every day. So there's an incredible amount of project management that goes on in the film and television industry. And so I can speak a little bit about that, having worked in that industry for about 50 years. So I have some expertise working on a number of television shows, and I can show samples of scheduling and call sheets and how it's done in the film and television industry.
Perfect. Dave, you've been in this for a long time. What are your thoughts?
Well, I started producing and coordinating 6 different shows each week in a TV station, and you had to be organized, and you had to organize a whole lot of other people, and you had to organize a whole lot of resources. And as was pointed out, everything had a deadline. So you had to have a show every week out of all whatever you did, and you planned as far in advance as you possibly could. And that kind of training brought me into project management in various layers. And eventually I worked on a very, very large project for NATO, in which it was for training pilots, and it's in use today. And I learned basics at the foot level of other people who were good at this, and then I learned a lot on my own and moving up through the ranks. So I've had a lot of fun doing it, and also there's been a lot of overnights where you don't know if it's going to happen. So, and in live television, that's a daily threat, that it's not going to happen.
So that's the expertise on the panel, which is massive. I'm going to toss up the QR code now. This is, of course, a question and answer show. So if you have questions, you can either shoot that QR code with your phone or tablet or whatever, or you can just simply type in askofficehours.global into any web browser, and the web system will take you exactly to where you can put your questions in. If you've been around office hours a long time and you're part of our Mukana system, then you can actually get another step. You get to vote those questions up or down. And the number of votes that any particular question gathers determines how quickly we get to it and how much time we spend talking about it. So that's there. I'm going to go around the panel again and just chat with people about anything you remember in terms of the impact of lousy planning on a project that you were associated with, or good planning. I mean, where have you seen this create disasters, and where have you seen it create real value because the projects were well organized? And I'm going to go around the horn the same way. Craig McFarland, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, it's funny. We used to be a services company, and we actually wrote our own software because we couldn't find enough project management software that was appropriate for the job. Now we'd vibe code it or something, but so we became a software company. But it's I used to love going into companies where people saw so many failed projects. We'd walk into the conference room with 20 or 30 other people, and you'd see everybody with their arms folded, like, oh, this is going to be a train wreck. I don't want to have anything to do with this. And it was, I love those sort of things because we usually turn it around, but you can just tell there's such a history of project failure after project failure because there's just too many loose ends and no one in charge and unclear guidelines and budget, and it's always a mess. And so it's like that's the default, is failure.
We've all, I think, been there. One of my first jobs in radio, in fact, the first time I was ever on the air, I think I oversold myself because I remember being put into an overnight shift and they literally just threw me in the control room and said, you're on in an hour. And I hadn't had any training and I hadn't had any onboarding. So I just remember the pure fear of going into something where there is absolutely no organization and you've got to do a task and you got to make it up on your own. It is awful. And I think without this kind of planning, almost anything that is of any importance has this huge chance of failure. Ryan, you talked a little bit about the connection between costs and good planning and things like that. What are your examples of times it's gone well or poorly?
It's always easier to talk about the ones that went poorly, so I'll start there. There's more than just a financial impact when projects go wrong. So speaking about technology projects, if we're not talking about the impact of people being able to move into their new house, you're often talking about systems running in parallel, or you're talking about an organization that because their system cutover isn't going right, they can't send out bills or they can't pay their vendors. And so that starts to create a whole series of stressors on the people inside of the organization. Maybe it's they're stressed out that their phone's ringing off the hook, or because they know that if revenue's not coming in, are we going to be able to make payroll? Sometimes a payroll system is actually part of what we're cutting over. And so you're thinking about impacting people's lives. But at the end of the day, those stressors mean that people are pulling heroics, people that are part of the project team. And so I've seen projects get ugly enough where folks leave an organization because they just can't deal any longer with the stress associated with all of those things that are just not going like they were supposed to go. And beyond just people leaving that are on the project team, there's now implications on the people that are not on the project team who just don't understand why things were going a certain way with their organization, with their day-to-day, with their work. And so they just feel like they are better off finding somewhere else to work. Now, on the flip side, you kind of ask yourself, if you're taking like a PMP certification, like what is the purpose of a project in the first place? Like, why do projects get undertaken? Well, business as usual tends to be such that there are some problems or some suboptimal scenarios in the first place with a company. I mean, if we're talking about construction or real estate, we're talking about this piece of land that's underutilized, this blighted building, this city that's growing in a way where, all of the needs are not met. And so it tends to be about trying to break status quo in the spirit of continuous improvement, about making something better. If we're talking about a business, it's really easy to just keep working in the business every day, but occasionally, if you want to grow, if you want to be in the lead, if you want to be competitive, you need to zoom out for a second and look at how we can work on the business, how we can improve things. And so there's good reason to take these things on, and when we get them right, everybody's lives are better. And frankly, they talk sometimes about, I've got this client who says, we're in the cutover period. He's like, it's kind of like, like having a baby, like, labor is painful. And then at the same time, there is this thing that comes out the other side of that challenging, painful moment. And it's a baby. And now, the world is better off for it. The organization is better off for it. So it's not that it isn't worth it. It's often worth the hard work that you have to go through. And at the same time, you better make sure as much of that as planning can go as right as it can go for the sake of everybody that's involved.
Yeah, and as lovely as the traditional old home childbirth was, boy, I know a lot of people who would say it's great to have a big hospital around you with a lot of organizational systems so that if anything goes wrong, we can get in there and fix it quickly and ensure the safety of the whole operation. That just makes perfect sense to me. Courtney, I'm going to drop down to you. Thoughts about things that have gone badly or things that have gone well?
Well, in television and film production, it is critical. You're working with a lot of union members, for one thing, and they're highly paid. And you have department heads, and you have a couple of things that you have to worry about. One is a schedule that you have to meet, because a lot of the times these episodic television has a delivery date to the network that you have to meet. And if you're behind schedule, you're not going to make your delivery date. The show's not going to air. So you have to bear all of that in mind. And the first AD and the production coordinator who's in charge of making up the scheduling, if they make one mistake on the schedule and forget and give, let's say, the number one cast member the wrong call time or the wrong location for that day's shooting, and they end up at a location that's 50 miles away instead of where they're supposed to be, the whole production comes to a halt. And you got 130 people getting paid really high salaries per hour sitting around tapping their foot because everything that they were prepared to shoot that day is out the window because the person that's the lead cast member or the director or any of the department heads. There's lots of single points of failure in scheduling for television and film because there are department heads whose departments may have difficulty going on if the department head isn't there or if the lead cast member isn't there. There's things such as residuals for SAG actors. And if you upgrade a background person from no lines to one line, that can make a difference of $40,000 on your back end in residuals if you're not careful in scheduling. So the assistant directors, that's all on them. They have to make sure that they have the right person and the right classification and the right contracts and what the financial obligations are going to be just to change the schedule around. A lot of actors have things in their contracts, pay or play contracts, where if they don't, if you cancel a week's worth of work because somebody, one of the department heads or the director gets sick, you can find yourself having to pay everybody anyway. So it can get fairly expensive, and now you're a week behind schedule and you may not be delivered. There's a cascading series of events that can happen just because someone throws a tantrum, something breaks, or one of your key department heads gets the wrong information on a call sheet.
Dave Trautman, what's top of mind for you in problems and successes?
Well, I have a great story. We were asked to cover one of these multi-sport huge games events, and we spent months and months planning and getting it all on the whiteboard and working it all out, who's going to do what, and how we're going to get this gear up there and all the rest. And we started shooting the first day, and it suddenly occurred to everybody we hadn't taught the crew how all these sports work. We just missed that one little thing. The cameras were in the wrong places. They were shooting the wrong people. They didn't know what the crowd was reacting to. They had no sense of what any of these games were. And we had a great meeting after the first day, and everyone was given a sort of coach, a person who knew how to play whatever game it was, and showed the whole crew where to focus, what's happening, and when things stop and start. And it was like, you can laugh about it now, but at the time we thought the whole thing was melting down.
Absolutely. Before we go to question and answer, I have one more little thing. Tools. There's so much talk nowadays. Everything is computerized. We've got all these things that are supposed to help us, from the simplest Excel spreadsheets all the way through very complicated software suites that are to help manage these kind of things. Just everybody, do you have any tools that you particularly like or don't like that you found effective or not effective in the organizational space like this? Craig, I'm going to start with you.
I'm a technology guy, but I think people can get really hung up on tools a little bit too much, like it's going to save them. And I'd rather have a super savvy project manager that can see how to save time on the schedule, like just intuitively know where to go to save time, money, or quality.
Okay, so it's not the piano, it's the piano player that matters. That if you've
Absolutely.
got the right brain behind any of these tools, it can be effective. And if you don't have the right brain, probably any tool can be a disaster. Ryan.
Well, I'm a tool fan, so I'll talk through a couple of them here. I just loaded up a couple on the screen. So the one that's taking the software world by storm right now is Linear. Jira is one that a lot of folks were using for the software development lifecycle. And somebody pointed out on Twitter the other day how cool their website is and that they've got this little like preview pane. And this is a functioning version of their application. So go check out linear.app and click through the way this tool works. It's just really minimalist design and kind of breaks things down. And it certainly can be used for more than just software. Specific to construction, Procore kind of owns this. Procore owns this space, and so it's always interesting to see how they handle it when you talk about different industry vertical specific applications. With construction, you've got physical space and you've got time and you've got budget that you're always trying to keep together, and things like the plans and the documents associated are really important. And then working our way a little bit closer to really simple, something that's more akin to Excel is Smartsheet. This just it looks and feels a lot like an Excel, but there's just a little bit more richness to the notifications and the ways that you can set up alerts and workflows. And then there's one other cool tool that is I'm using to vibe code very custom bespoke project plans depending on what it is that we're doing. And so we basically uploaded a project plan spreadsheet that we had and asked it to create something really visual. And the idea here is that you can just kind of conversationally tell it what you think the client wants to see, what the audience and the stakeholders want to see. Okay, change these colors, make this thing a drop down, and it might just create some compelling visuals that you feel like you're missing. if you're using out of the box or off the shelf project management tools. So I wouldn't hesitate at all to fire up Claude Code or fire up V0 and tell it to just build you something that's compelling for your very niche or specific use case that is that one project.
Okay, you popped my bubble. You mentioned vibe coding. You mentioned essentially AI tools and things like that. If anybody on the panel wants to weigh in on whether or not what you see in terms of the future of project management and things like that, and whether it's going to be affected by that, then raise your hand on the panel discussion things here, and I'll come to you. But it's changing everything, so it's certainly gonna impact project management as we go forward. I'm constantly astonished by how many of my friends and colleagues are just saying, "Yeah, I dove into this idea of just asking the AI for some small tool that'll help me with a particular project." And it seems like there's always a get up and get started cost to that, but I think there's a lot of
It's
help.
Bill, it's a little difficult to build those things if you don't understand what project management software is supposed to do for you. So
Good point.
you
If you
could
can't
describe
define the
what,
problem.
yeah.
Yeah.
Then you have a lot of trouble with fixing your own software to get. I mean, Ryan is in the scope and understands construction and therefore knows what the parameters are and how load leveling works and how resource remanagement works and all that. But a person who's just going to try it might find it a little more daunting. I come at it from AEC details, which was back in the early 90s. Then I got into a Microsoft project because everybody in the world was using it. And about 2009, I moved over to OmniPlan. And I've been using that ever since. Just finished a 2-year project this last spring. And that one worked beautifully for me. And it kept all the subcontractors in line and coordinated, and nobody missed a deadline. So some of the software itself is you can assess it because you know what you're looking for, but the project management was all in my head and on paper when I was doing television projects because nobody was going to follow a Gantt chart. They weren't going to understand what to look for.
I've looked at them. That's as far as I've ever gone. Courtney Gooden, you raised your hand on this.
Yeah, for production coordination and software, and I haven't been in production in the last few years since AI was invented or started to use large language models. So I'm not sure how much of the software has changed. But one of the primary leaders in production management software is Entertainment Partners, who is one of the largest payroll companies, union payroll companies in Hollywood. And they have scheduled a variety of these. Movie Magic was a software that was written for production management and scheduling back 30 years ago. Stephen Greenfield, I think, wrote the original, and I think it was bought by Entertainment Partners. And so they have budgeting software, they have production management, they have scheduling. And this is the stuff that schedules all your actors and below the line crew and creates your call sheets and your daily schedules and lets you break down your scripts and make sure that you put them in the correct shooting order for the best, highest efficiency, that kind of stuff, so that you organized your shooting days on days where, let's say, you're shooting out the same location for 5 different scenes on 2 different episodes. So it takes into account, and because they are a union signator and they serve as the employer of record for a lot of these productions that go on, so you're not working for NBC, let's say, or CBS or Netflix. You're working for Entertainment Partners, so they are the employer of record because they handle all the union requirements and all the residuals and all accounting for all of that stuff. So it can be fairly complex in accounting for residuals and payments that go on even after the project is completed for, 5 or 10 years after the project is completed. They have to track all of those residuals and keep up with paying those to the various actors and above the line personnel over a long period of time. So there's those, and there's Cast and Crew, which also has production software available. They're another payroll company. So those type of production management software generates a lot of the schedules and tools and manages a lot of that stuff. And they're very good at it. And because they are They have to know all the union rules, and a lot of times each individual local has different rules, different contracts, and so they have to be familiar with every contract that comes out. And every time the unions negotiate a new contract, that entertainment partners has to be able to take into account any all the rate changes and all the rule changes, so that they don't make a mistake and go against one of the union rules and set themselves up for a very expensive grievance from one of the unions. So it's very careful planning, and knowledge of union rules and rates is necessary.
Craig, you want to wrap this up for us before we go to Q&A?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the AI aspect of things. With a lot of automation, there used to be a rule of thumb that if you're going to do something over and over again by 10 times, it's easier and it would pay for itself to put in some sort of automation. And so it's like, if you're only going to do it once, don't bother automating it. AI has changed that a little bit, and that the effort to automate something is a lot lower, but you still need to keep an eye on it.
So this is the part of the show where we head into questions from our global audience. Cindy Drozda is our reader today. So Cindy, what have we got?
Our first question comes in from Brian Carney in Wheaton, Illinois. I tend to reverse engineer my projects. Does it make the most sense to work backward from a deadline or the final desired outcome? Am I missing something?
And we're going to Ryan Raderman for the answer.
Yeah, I think that the risk in reverse engineering from a deadline is that projects tend to fill the space you give them, like a gas would its container. So anytime that we've put out a timeline that we felt like, well, this is certainly safe and it's something that's going to be easily achievable, ends up with a series of challenges that really takes all of that time and then some. So if there's really one piece of advice or tooling I have, it's that you kind of undercommit and over-deliver, and you build kind of different internal deadlines with a couple different, release valves in there relative to the thing that actually needs to get done. And then there's also the importance of the bottom-up approach, right, where you take that project and you break that down into the most kind of atomic unit that you possibly can. The lowest estimatable unit is something that you'll often hear, and add it up and see where that takes you, and find something that you can just apply a little bit of buffer with on the other side, or on the end of that timeline.
Dave Trautman, your thoughts?
Well, in my early days, I did do it that way. I was on a fixed schedule, so I had to finish deadlines, and then I worked backwards from there. But I had as my advantage that it was mostly studio work. So I knew who the crew was going to be. I knew the lighting was going to be taken care of. I knew the recording would be used to these tape machines over here. And so it would be a fixed environment. And that meant I was only handling the people. And then when we were going on location and doing things in the field, a lot of variables come into play, and a lot of things that you can't possibly anticipate. We had a tornado up here once, and so it can interrupt your plan. And when I left studio work, I stopped doing it backwards, and I went from the beginning and said, how much can I cut out of here to get to the deadline? So that was the other strategy.
Craig McFarland.
Yeah, so I mean, I like the notion of starting with what is the end. I think AWS and a few others will say, write the press release, because it helps you get a clear eye on what's the goal, and then you work backwards. The problem is, as the others have pointed out, scheduling and picking a plan. People often default to, oh, well, this is reasonable, but that reasonable doesn't account for all the things that can happen. So I think a lot of people really say, if you pick the timeline where it's like, it would be crazy if it took that long, well, pick that time, because then you can pull it back in, because people are shocked when you pull it in and say, yep, we're ahead of schedule. They'll love you for it.
It's crazy if it takes that long, times two. Courtney.
Yeah, in film and television production, a lot of times, when they greenlight a movie, let's say, they will have your release dates already set on the calendar for a year away, let's say. And that's because there's certain release times, the summer blockbuster period, or around the holidays, the Christmas release schedule. That's when all the tentpole movies come out. And if you're going to put your film into production, you're going to have to hit that distribution deadline. Otherwise, your movie may not play for another year. So it's pretty difficult to schedule stuff because you have to account for post-production, which has to be accounted for in the back end of the schedule, and the head end of the schedule is production, obviously. And in the event of let's say a television series, you may not have the entire season written yet, and it starts airing at a certain date, and you have to deliver those shows, let's say once a week, if it's a weekly episodic television series. You have to deliver those shows on time, in time for the network to get them to air. Otherwise, they're going to have to run a rerun, and they're going to mess up their whole schedule. There's advertisers are booked. It has an incredible back end consequences if you don't meet your schedule. And if you have the luxury of working on a spec script, let's say, or a film that is not sold into distribution, and you're just going to produce something that's going to be run around the festival circuit, then you can take your time. It's not as critical scheduling, and some people take auteurs. Sometimes it'll take 3 years to produce a film and direct and finish a film without a deadline to release it. But it depends on the type of contract, the type of project, and whether it's has a drop dead date where you have to deliver that project or not. So it's kind of like the other projects here, where if you're building an apartment complex, you may have already leased those apartments and it's still under construction. You're going to have a problem because you're not going to be bringing in any money until you can put people in those apartments. So a similar problem to construction and other types of event schedule.
Let's go to our next question.
Florence Donald is up next in Silver Spring, Maryland. Florence asks, when planning a media production, which core work streams are included? Discuss corporate events, sports events, film, TV, news, and the emerging content creator events.
Dave Trautman's going to take a swing at this. Dave?
Well, whenever I deal with clients, I explain to them, if they're not already familiar with what I do, that there's a period called pre-production where you plan everything and you work out what's possible, what's not, how you're going to get there, what you're going to need, that sort of thing. Then you, in pre-production, start contracting these things or setting them up or booking the place or hiring the talent or getting a crew. Then you have production, and production is organized around how we're going to get all those things that we thought we would have in pre-production in the proper order, and that they all perform well and that there's no mistakes along the way. Then at the end is post-production, and you have a follow-up to production where you have to take the material that was created, hopefully really beautiful stuff that everybody did and it all worked out because the plan you did in pre-production. And then in post, you have all this useful material, which you turn into the finished product. I'm not too familiar with, I've watched corporate events, but I've never had to produce one. So I'll leave that one aside. I've done a little news, and I've actually done a little documentary on how the news is done. And so that fits the same. They spend the morning in preparation. They have an afternoon meeting and a staff thing about the order of events because things change as the day goes on. And then they hit the studio, turn on the red light, and go. And you have to go. You can't stop. You have to do it all with the breaks and everything else. Sporting events are even more complicated, of course, because there's many more things about a venue or a location where you're doing something and the parameters of what an audience brings to the show and that sort of stuff. And so you can't plan. Virtually a third of a sporting event is supposed to be unplanned. Otherwise, we'd write a script for it. When you asked about emerging content creators, I don't work with any. I haven't been one myself, so I won't even touch that one. And creator events, I'm not sure what they are, but I understand Mr. Beast spends millions creating this game show that he does every couple of years. And so his pre-planning is probably years in advance. And I know from the Olympics, because we've had the Olympics here in Canada, the guys I know who worked on the Olympics up here were 5 years in the planning, and then there's like 2 weeks of production.
Courtney.
Yeah, as far as film and television production goes, it kind of all starts with, well, the pickup of the show, basically the network or whatever, the distribution company agreeing to finance your movie. It all starts with the writing of the film if it hasn't already been written, if the script is not finalized. So it starts in the writer's room and you generate the scripts And in the case of episodic television, you generate a series of scripts because you have that story arc that may have to spread across, 7 or 8 episodes or the entire season. So the writers flesh out the basic story arc, and then they start writing the scripts. And then as soon as the script is written, you break down the script. So you run it through the breakdown, so you determine what characters are there. Do you have to cast new characters for that episode? Are there day players? Which cast characters, regulars appear in this episode? Sometimes you'll have an episode where some of the regular characters don't appear at all. So you have to then start doing your scheduling based on the script breakdown. And so you usually get everybody together into a room and they look through the episode and they talk through it. And all the department heads are there and all the cast members are there, and they'll read through the episode and discover, each person, each head of the department will chime in, and visual effects will say, well, we're going to need 3 weeks on the back end to do the visual effects for this episode. So, you have to build that into the schedule. So as you break down the script and you do the first initial meetings, you determine what the scheduling is going to be for that particular episode, what locations you're going to shoot, what problems you're going to have with locations. And for example, I can give you a look behind once the schedule is set, they do a breakdown. I mean, they do a one-liner schedule, which is published and all the crew members get it. And this is what it looked like on Dexter. This is what's called a one-liner, and it shows you the scene number, the description of the scene, how many pages you're shooting that day. These numbers over here are the cast numbers. The lower the number, the more important the cast member is. So the leads in the show are, like number 1 is Michael C. Hall in this case. And this is the location where you're shooting. So this is given to all the crew members as they schedule each day of production, and it outlines the day that you're going to shoot it, if you're going to move between locations or where you're moving to, and holidays are in there. And you have the schedule for the entire week for that particular episode. So you go through week, day by day, and this was an 8-day episode. This is a one-liner. And then you have, then they publish a more complete schedule, which shows all the details for each particular scene that you're shooting, the cast members that are going to be working, what additional labor is required, etc. Any specific things that have to happen on this shooting day, on this particular scene. So it's broken down by scene and shooting day. So that's the full schedule. And then, of course, you get your call sheets, which are given out to all the crew members on a daily basis. So this gives, so everybody knows, A, what the call time is, B, where you're going to be shooting. Is it going to be on stage 8? Are you going to be on a location at this Gordon Street location? The scene that you're shooting, the cast numbers that you're going to be shooting, is it day or night? That's important. You got to look at that to find out, we're not going to have a call time till 5 p.m. in the afternoon. We're going to shoot all night. And it lists all the actors that are going to be working this day. And then it shows the scenes that you'll be shooting and anything that is required, additional background people, other actors that are going to be needed for the specific shooting day. Also, it shows you on the bottom, it shows you exactly what's coming up in the next couple of days. That's the advanced schedule. So everybody in the crew knows what you're going to be shooting the next day. So you can be ready with anything that you need to shoot that particular day. And of course, on the back side of the call sheet is a breakdown of every single department, each position of each person, their name, and the call time that they're called for that particular day. So you use this to determine when you have to show up on set, and who else is going to be working that day is all listed on the back of the call sheet here. So that's how the scheduling works on a typical episodic television show. And it's very similar also for major motion pictures. Those type of production scheduling and call sheets are pretty much the same.
Cool. Thanks for a look behind the scenes at what we've all seen on television. Let's go on to our next question.
This is my question. Cindy Drozda in Erie, Colorado. What is the smallest project that you've worked on, and how is it different from managing larger projects?
Ryan Waterman's going to weigh in on this. Ryan?
So if you think about a typical like onshore resources, you're usually no less than something like $200 an hour if you're hiring outsourced resources for a project. And so something like a 40-hour project might be something like $8,000 for you to procure some outside firm. Let's say you're like building a small website. Um, for 40 hours, there's not a lot of room for error. And so I think the key message that I'd have here is, Cindy, smaller doesn't necessarily mean easier. There's kind of this sweet spot, right? When you're talking about multi-million dollar projects, there's a series of complexities that exist there with regard to all of the different teams. And, if it's construction, trades stepping on one another, people always trying to get things done faster because the initial timeline is going to be really long. But on the opposite end of that spectrum, you've got to have a whole different level of efficiency and a whole different type of, a pre-baked out of the box. Like I'd say the big thing, Cindy, is if we're talking about a small project, you're not going to be successful trying to get something like that done quickly if it's not something that group has done like 50 times before. Like then it's not, if it's not something that's just been done before a bunch of times exactly like that, then it's not a small project, or it was just a fool that thought it might be.
That's really a fascinating observation, because I'm running into a lot of that. The things that I have to figure out as opposed to the things I know how to do, the difference in the amount of time it takes to execute and invent at the same time versus just execute, to me, always astonishes me. Courtney, you had a quick thought?
Yeah, the things that smaller projects in television are documentaries, and I've worked on a lot of documentaries that are really great because you have a small crew. I've worked on shows like Dexter where you got 160 people in the crew and a lot of cast members. And then I've worked on documentaries where you may have a cameraman, a camera assistant, and a sound mixer. I worked as a sound mixer by myself. So it's a three-person crew. And on a three-person crew, and usually a director, you're a lot more nimble. You can change ideas, change direction, change the schedule without cramping anyone's style or having to worry about the back end, creating hundreds of thousands of dollars of expense by not scheduling something correctly. So there's a lot less pressure on a small crew documentary, and it's a lot more relaxed. And a lot more fun. I've had more fun on documentaries traveling to different places and working with the same cameraman and director on a number of documentaries. It's been great fun.
We have the next question up. Cindy, what have we got?
From panelist Dave Trautman in Edmonton, Canada. What was the biggest plan you ever saw, not your own, and where was it used?
And I'm going to start with Dave Trautman. Dave.
Yeah, well, I was hired once to do a training program, a multimedia training program for the staff of a pulp mill. And a pulp mill is a very large operation, and we were having to go through and learn all of the bits and pieces. And we had to know, of course, with training, you got to know what the person actually does. So we were taken on a tour through the plant and out into the woods, see how they cut down the trees and then how they turn it all into paper.
Yeah, Dave, that's the pulp mill is something where they turn trees into paper. Am I getting that right? So it's very complicated. Yeah.
First it's pulp, and then they make it into paper with a follow-on process. So yeah, everything from toilet paper up to fine book paper. The process of shutting down a plant is very complicated and very dangerous. And during our tour, I was taken into a project manager's office, and I use quotes there because I didn't expect there to be one, and walked in and saw that his office was wallpapered with a plan. It went on 3 walls, and it was all on paper printed out, and it was a critical path. And I asked him, so what's this plan? And he goes, oh, that's how we shut down the plant. And if there's an emergency or a fire or something is happening that should be stopped, they need to shut it down very carefully. And it had every step in the process. And he said he stood in the office and with a walkie-talkie called out all the steps, and everybody at different stations in the plant would follow along and shut the plant down step by step. And if they didn't do that, it could either blow up or catch fire, or a lot of expensive equipment gets destroyed. So I was very surprised, but also I've never seen a plan that big ever since.
Well, it makes kind of sense when you think about it. A huge building full of sawdust and paper is not exactly the safest environment. If you
there's
cast
not
off
one
a
big
spark,
lever where you just shut it all
shut
down.
it
You know, you can't do that.
Let's go to Ryan Rainman. Ryan.
Yeah, so Project Stargate is one of the biggest infrastructure projects ever taken on. It's actually a series of data centers, and one of those is being built in Wisconsin. And I happen to be really close with the individual that's in charge of the power that's going to need to come in from We Energies, which is the energy utility in Wisconsin. And so, that interconnect requires new power lines to be built, requires new power generation. There's competition with the existing um, uh, power customers in the state naturally, and the amount of power that's required is equivalent to the entire state of Wisconsin's existing kind of power draw. And so we're
So
talking
the
about
data center is going to double the load just by itself. This huge thing?
essentially that's true. Now the way that actually gets done is a lot of the behind the meter power generation, meaning right, it's not all just taken off the grid. It's actually on site generation of a majority of that power. But there's reasons you need to be connected to the grid. You've got kind of this backup thing. You've got, well, if you're producing more power than you're actually using, you can feed it back out to the grid. And so all of these data centers are connected in, even if it isn't the case that they're really going to necessarily be drawing from the grid. And so when you look just at what's involved in the power connection component of a multi-billion-dollar project like that, it's by far surpassing the complexity of what I'm used to working on in my day-to-day, and very, very fun to try and understand. And especially, and there's another question on this coming up, right? The political and people dynamics associated with all the people whose lives are impacted by decisions and projects like that if it's not handled
Oh,
just
yeah.
right.
Yeah, all sorts of public hearings and things like that. Courtney.
I think one of the largest projects I haven't heard about was like the CERN Super Collider, which is the Large Hadron Collider that was built, a giant 17-mile loop that they had to get clearance. And I think they worked on that for 4 decades to get it completed. And it doesn't produce anything except research. So that's pretty amazing for a project that takes 30 to 40 years to complete and billions of dollars. And the only product is knowledge. That's a pretty amazing project. And you can imagine how long and what the planning was like on that. As far as film and television production go, probably, Heaven's Gate was probably known as a disaster of a movie that went way, 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 way over schedule and nearly bankrupted a television studio. Also, Cleopatra had a really long extracted schedule, and they had to deal with the sickness of, Liz Taylor and, a lot of the other cast members. Uh, it ran over budget as well and nearly bankrupted the studio as well.
Next question.
Here's one from Florence Donald in Silver Spring, Maryland. How does the way we plan from show to show here at Office Hours differ from traditional or mainstream production planning?
I tempted to make a joke and say we plan, but the actual answer is yes, we do a lot of planning. You'd be surprised at how many times people meet that you don't see on the air to get each one of these shows going. Let's go to Dave Trautman. Dave?
Well, for me, Office Hours is a completely different animal, and it looks like TV, it acts like TV, it even has the quality of TV, but it's entirely different from TV. And I've found, just from my enjoyable experience, this is the largest group of expert volunteers I've ever worked with. Most of volunteers that I'm dealing with come with some understanding but very little skill. We have that on probably reversed. I have very little understanding of what's going on sometimes, but I know the people running it have great levels of skill. So in that sense, the way we do it here is we rely on the expertise to get us through the planning process.
Craig McFarland.
Yeah, that's very, very true. This Office Hours is a community of experts with a large group of volunteers that have a lot of passion. That if we had to go out and hire people and pay them to plan and build out and do this show, it would be massively expensive. But because this group of volunteers, this community is so passionate about producing high quality material that it's pretty amazing to watch. I do a lot of the back end automation and structure and project management type stuff here, and it's just amazing to watch the level of commitment and passion, and that covers for a lot. So I think that's one of the biggest differences is just um, it's a lot of volunteers that really care about the product.
Yeah, to me, it's really fascinating because most of the time when you're in a system this complex, there is money on the line in terms of people with salaries, sometimes high salaries, who are held to account by the virtue of the fact that if you don't get your jobs done on time and get things right, you don't get paid. In a volunteer organization like that, money is off the table. So it truly is a sense of personal pride and exploration. I think a lot of us are here and have been here for a long time because A, we love the people that we get to hang out with. They are incredible. All of our panels, all of the back end people, there's just so much cross pollination where you can learn so much from the people around you. And everybody is, I'll be happy to tell you how I do what I do just because I'm excited to learn how you do what you do. So that's been a fabulous thing. So it's a different thing. And I think we're maybe not unique, but it's certainly unique in my experience, the quality of the people I get to associate with here every day, including the people who ask our questions. And we're going to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks the panel, what challenges have you dealt with when managing cross-border, cross-cultural projects?
Oh, this could take some time. I'm going to keep things under tight rein here. Ryan, dive in.
Yeah, I mean, my team both has clients outside of the United States, but also teams in India and in the Philippines that we're often working with. And so time zone is by far the most challenging. Importantly, it can also be massively to your advantage. I mean, there's this joke going on right now with regard to AI agents that say like, "Hey, you're about to go to sleep. Like, do you know what your agents are up to right now? Are they going to be, productive?" And that was always the case, and still is the case with the offshore resources, right? That being able to leverage the entire cycle of the clock. That if you've got your requirements ready before bed, that when you wake up, likely there's going to be some progress that you're going to be able to test. So I mostly have found benefits, but time zone and being able to meet synchronously and get them in front of clients is where I've found the biggest set of challenges there.
Yeah, I always found that fascinating that, I got involved with a group that had people in Europe and in Asia. And it was interesting to think that progress really was 24/7 because when one group was going to sleep, the other one was waking up. So things could just get passed off and continue on. Courtney, your thoughts?
Yeah, in production, at least live production is something different. You do have to worry about time zones if you've got a multinational live production that's being produced from a variety of different locations. That's a consideration. But typically, I've worked on a lot of low budget features which decide to shoot in a foreign country because it's cheaper and it's cheaper to hire a crew over there. But then you have to deal with the language barrier. And so you may schedule something the wrong way, and you get over there and you discover, hey, they've got completely different rules for production over here, or union rules. They take a siesta at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you didn't account for that in the scheduling. And you have to deal with everything takes twice as long because if your main talent if your director's only speaks English and the entire crew speaks Lithuanian, you have to translate every single instruction that comes out, and that takes twice as long. So you have to think of that consideration when you're budgeting something in a foreign country where language may be an issue, as well as, you may save some money, but you may run into some problems that you didn't foresee.
Craig McFarland.
Yeah, I obviously agree with everything that's been said. Time zones are definitely one of the biggest issues. Just thinking back to a couple of projects where there was, I don't know, 6 or 7 different time zones in 3 different countries, and I think it was beyond the language itself. It's also the colloquialism, especially sports. If I make a joke or say, "Oh, we got to," we're in the ninth. Uh, or certain inning or whatever, all those sort of things are lost on someone that isn't familiar with that sport, where it's a big world and a lot of people know different things, but cutting down on those and just being aware of communication. Each country, each area has their own norms of communicating. And so learning that early, like when they're just nodding, are they nodding because they're polite, or are they nodding that, yes, I really get what you're saying, I'm going to do that thing? So going overboard in the beginning to learn the communication style that's necessary for each of those teams is important.
As we go into the seventh inning stretch with a sticky wicket, Dave Trautman.
And I understood all of that.
I didn't.
Wickets is cricket, so there you go. The rules in the UK are different for storing data and having servers co-located. And I was doing a project for a UK employment agency, and we had developed this thing in Canada, and we wanted to host the data and operate the servers for them. And they said, well, there wasn't any way we could do that because they have actual laws that say data for their citizens has to reside in servers in their citizen area. And then I discovered after that that that's the same for Canada. We don't like our stuff being overseas. But I did a documentary once that took me across the US. I had 3 or 4 locations in the US and then 2 locations in the UK and a couple in Canada. And it took me most of a year to shoot this thing. But I found dealing with people and having them understand what I'm doing was a little tricky, even in my own country. And I found myself having to sort of say, well, what I need is a NTSC camera, and I need tripod. And in the UK, they're going, oh, I got cameras. I can do that. Yeah, okay. And I'm hiring up these things, and they're not NTSC cameras. And they don't know why I'm upset about it. So, yeah, there's that kind of stuff that happens. So planning, again, is going to get you there. If you can plan those kind of details, you're a good project manager.
We have another great question here, but right before we do that, I'm going to mention a couple of things coming up. Don't forget, tomorrow, Wednesday, is Audio Day. So audio Q and answer at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on the Standard Channel here. Don't forget, we have our YouTube channel too, so it has a storehouse of a lot of our content up there. And for those of you who are interested in volunteering and or donating, we have processes there. So go to officehours.global, the main website, and search on those topics, and you'll see ways you can kind of help us continue to do this every day. In fact, officehours.global/donate is the main direction right into there. Let's get to our last question, and then we'll wrap things up. Next question.
This one's from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What project management considerations for handling more delicate elements, like talent, without derailing performance?
Yeah, the human efforts. We've all heard that regardless of the best laid plans, if the head actor or actress throws a little tantrum in the middle of things because the pressure gets too big, sometimes that stops everybody from getting their work done. So, Ryan Raderman, what have you run into?
In technology projects, we refer to the people side of the project as change management. And so essentially, you've got a need to identify WIFMs. That stands for what's in it for me, right? From the perspective of all of those various people that are going to be affected by the outcome of the project and that are going to have to contribute to the project. So there being a unified change story, a change leader guide, coaching managers on how their gripes and complaints ought to be filtered up and not to be griped about around the water cooler with people that perhaps report to them, and giving them that story around what it is that everybody can expect for benefits and outcomes. And then fun little things too, right? We tend to, on big enough projects, create a fun committee for the project. There's a brand. We've got Project Fusion, Project DeLorean, Project One. And branded swag, right? It's cool. Everybody's got the Stanley mug with the branded cup on there, and they're walking around, and then you have a go live happy hour where everybody gets to celebrate their success together. So those are some of the things that we employ to try and deal with the harder part of the project, which is people, not the actual technology deployment.
Courtney.
Yeah, in the entertainment industry, it's a whole level of hierarchy that you have to know about. You have to stay in your lane. You have to recognize the chain of command. You know, if you're a below line person, you got to talk to the assistant director, and they can talk to the actors, but you can't talk to the actors directly. So if you don't stay in your chain of command, it can disrupt the whole thing, and heads will roll, as they say. And also, you have to be aware in scheduling. There are things that a lot of actors these days are so big, they're getting paid so much money, they all have producer credits. So they're not only the lead actor, but they're also the producer. So you got to be careful not to upset any one of the / producers, because they have the ability to fire anybody on the set, even though they're just an actor. So you got to be careful about whose toes you step on, or actors that are number 7 on the call sheet can never pushed to have their scene shot earlier than someone's who's number 2 on the call sheet. So they get into petty arguments like this. I've seen arguments break down over contract issues such as how far away their parking space is from the stage door. That's written into the contract. And if, certain actors can demand a certain distance from the stage door, and if somebody gets moved to the parking lot across the street, the production comes to a halt because until that parking space is opened up for that person that has it in their contract, they have to be parked within 20 feet of, stupid stuff like that is built into contracts. And if you don't know all the detritus that is built into all those contracts, it can throw a wrench into your scheduling.
Which is going to kind of bring us to the end of things. I wanted to mention one thing. Next week, we already know that our next show on Tuesday, our next Tuesday Focus, is on eCam Live. It's a deep dive, and we're going to have a really outstanding panel. Daniel Chi, Alex Johnson, Kurt Nugik, and our old friend Doc Rock will be here. So that's coming up next week in this time slot. For this week, I get to say an incredible thank you to everybody on the panel who has helped us parse through this very important topic. I mean, this is really where the rubber meets the road. Good planning, in my experience, after decades in this business, is the difference between miserable days and days that aren't as miserable. Sometimes they have to be miserable just because you're trying to get a lot of work done in a short amount of time. But when everybody's on the same page moving together and know what they're supposed to do next, I just think it creates hugely better potential for a good experience in any kind of production environment like this. Our thanks to all the producers, those of you who put questions into the show, to our amazing panelists. We can't do this without you, and we're hugely appreciative of you. To our back-end crew, you'll see a credit roll at the end of things, and everybody there, plus more people than I can possibly tell you, put in a lot of work to make this happen every single time. Our Talk Traversal, which we traditionally close the show with, this was episode 2163. That's right, we've done 2,163 shows as of wrapping this one up. We would have traveled 7,000 miles to get to the people who brought expertise to the show today. That's 21,000 kilometers, 58 million bananas for scale. Watch the credits, pay attention, and we will be back next Tuesday with another edition of the Office Hours Tuesday Focus. Bye-bye.